Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Rosenblatt.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for having me, Rabbi. Mazel Tov to the B'nai Mitzvah, Lucy, Ben. I'm deeply grateful that my friend Rabbi Cosgrove invited me to be here today. I admire this congregation. I appreciate the joy and warmth I've seen and heard here today, and I've seen on previous visits. I have colleagues and friends who are here. This is a place, a special place, filled with love. And we need that love. We need that love, now more than ever. We need it because we come together at a time when our hearts are heavy, scarred, broken. I know that for me, like for many of you, these have been some of the hardest days of my adult life. We're all in pain, mourning, our lapels torn, wondering what the future holds. And you know, it's an odd feeling because we find ourselves looking ahead toward a future that now seems almost entirely unknowable, but it's as if life has been overtaken by a past that we as Jews know all too well. Because I think for all of us, everyone sitting here in this sanctuary, the scenes that unfolded over the weekend, that came to light in the subsequent days, they were horrifying. They were shocking. They were unmooring. And yet, in some corner of our mind, in some recess of our soul, they were familiar. They hearken back to a previous time, to stories we hear from our parents, or our grandparents, or our great-grandparents. Because I know all of us have heard about Cossacks mauling Jews in the Pale of Settlement, or about Nazis and Poles beating and burning Jews in Berlin and Warsaw, out in the streets, or neighbors suddenly seized by bloodlust, wildly murdering Jews in Baghdad or Mashhad. But all of this seems so far away. Hazy recollections, grainy black and white photos, pages in a history book, the stuff of museums. Except now it isn't. Like many of you, I have family in Israel right now, under siege, and others being deployed to the front line. I have staff who can't locate their loved ones. I have friends who are gone, just gone. We learned just yesterday that my 14-year-old's summer camp counselor, who had been missing, was identified. Yet another body to add to the count of 1,300 and growing. I've seen images of bodies burned beyond recognition. Teenagers at a concert, trapped, forever trapped, in the scorched husk of their car. I've seen videos of people battered beyond what I ever imagined possible. A Thai man, bleeding, semi-conscious, on the floor while a Hamas terrorist tries to decapitate him with a shovel. And then there are the hostages, the sweet, sweet children literally held in the clutches of Hamas. The crying boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, encircled by a group of jeering peers his own age who laugh as they beat him and taunt him in a language he doesn't understand. Another innocent little boy, maybe 4 or 5, sitting on a table, forced to say Bismillah before he drinks a cup of water. And then there is the girl, maybe 15 or 16 months. She's too young to talk. Mocked by grinning captors who squeeze her cheeks and ask her in Arabic about the whereabouts of her parents, knowing full well that they had murdered them the day before. I'm haunted by these videos. I'm broken by these pictures. I'm shattered by these stories. What we've witnessed it's beyond words. It's beyond imagination. It's beyond. We literally don't have the language to describe it. Think about it. The word genocide was coined by an American Jewish lawyer in 1944 to describe the extermination of the Armenian people by the Ottomans. Scholars didn't have a broadly accepted term to characterize the annihilation of 6 million Jews until the term Holocaust was popularized in 1978 after a TV miniseries of the same name. We simply don't have the words. We don't have the words for the evil practiced at this kind of scale with such rage and velocity. But that's what happened in our Jewish homeland a week ago today, last Shabbat. And this Shabbat, we read from the very first parsha of the very first book of the Torah. We read Breshit, and again, our B'nai Mitzvah graced us today. And here at the very beginning of the world itself, what stands out? That God created elephants, towering redwood trees, tiny bumblebees, babbling brooks, and everything in between. It's extraordinary. That Hashem himself formed Adam, formed man from the dust of the earth, blew into his nostrils the breath of life. Extraordinary. But when I think about where we are today, what really stands out is that in the beginning, it is very clear that Hashem created good and evil. At the end of the very first day, we read, God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. At the end of each day, God looks at what was created and notes that it is good, or even very good. And if there is good by extension, there must be not good. If there is light, there must be darkness. Throughout this parsha, we have clear examples of evil, like Cain killing his brother Abel. And then toward the end of the parsha, many generations later, we have the beginning of the story of Noah, when God sees so much evil, he wants to flood the world. In this core text, the difference between good and evil, it's laid out so clearly. This distinction is at the core of our world and our humanity. And yet, as Rabbi Cosgrove shared, and as we've all seen in recent days, there are those in this city, in this country, and on campuses that many of us, myself included, attended many years ago, who seem unable to make these basic differences. The distinctions that are so obvious. In the face of the sheer sadism and frothing viciousness unleashed on innocents, men and women, boys and girls, an elderly peace activist, retired social workers, babies and fetuses. Many people have asked me, like, where are our university presidents? Who are these students? What is going on? And perhaps, to my mind, this is the greatest failure, the one that troubles me the most. Because while I am absolutely certain that Israel will overcome, I don't have the same certainty about how to repair this failure. Not the intelligence failure, again, of the Shin Bet. It will be corrected. Not the military failure of the IDF. It will be resolved. But the moral failure of our supposed friends, the learned and progressive, here in the West, here in our midst. Now, to be clear, I am not saying this is some universal condition. You heard from the mayor last night, right here. President Biden has been absolutely rock solid. The vast majority of elected officials, like New York's own Congressman Richie Torres, have been outstanding and unflinching. And groups like the National Action Network and the Asian American Foundation, they spoke up without hesitation. Celebrities like Bono and Madonna, they didn't dither, but they used their voices to show compassion and empathy. No one would describe any of those people, any of those organizations, as conservative, and yet the collapse, the utter collapse of the progressive sphere, it's not just alarming to me, it's a catastrophe. A pathetic mentality of moral relativism has captured our colleges, it's overtaken our universities. Even our most prestigious institutions seem incapable, as Rabbi Cosgrove said, of calling out anti-Semitism with the same clarity, the same conviction that they bring to nearly every other social issue, every conceivable grievance, every microaggression or accidental act of misgendering. But instead, when Jews burn, they equivocate, they hesitate, they struggle to find the words. It isn't evil, they tell us. It's understandable. It isn't wicked, it's justified. It isn't rape, it's resistance. And I worry deeply because it's obvious that this sickness won't be contained to the quad. It's not going to stay in the student center. It's a kind of moral degeneracy that's not going to remain on the op-ed pages of the Columbia Daily Spectator or the Tufts Daily. Instead, these students, they graduate and they move on to the assignment desks of newsrooms, to the mail rooms of talent agencies, to the CSR desks of corporations, to the halls of Congress. Now, while it's dark, there are some signs of dawn. Alumni from Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania are holding administrations accountable for their cowardice. Thank God for people like Bill Ackman and Mark Rowan for speaking up. Firms like Winston and Strawn are reminding their recruits that they will pay a price for prejudice. And companies like Google, L'Oreal, the NBA, UPS, they're joining our workforce pledge at ADL and showing the world they will stand with their Jewish employees and their Jewish customers. Now look, these might be isolated examples right now, but they're incredibly consequential. And they're consequential on many levels, but particularly to me, because they illustrate what each of you, what all of us can do as alumni, as donors, as employers, as executives, as human beings with agency and free will. These moments create momentum, something we can take inspiration from, that indeed we can applaud and we can build on, to save not just our people, although that's enough, but to save society from itself. Now, it's going to take time. It's going to take time to reverse this trend. And it's going to take work to remediate the moral mold that's contaminated these institutions. But this pales in comparison to what our brothers and sisters in Israel are facing right now. But it's just as existential. We can't afford, all of you, all of us, can't afford to take our lives here for granted, like my grandfather did growing up in Magdeburg, Germany, like my wife's family did growing up in Tehran, Iran. If it could happen to our dear children, and that's how I'm referring to them, our children in Okafim, in Kibbutz Be'eri, it could happen here. And if you don't think so, you're absolutely kidding yourselves. Yesterday, we all had an excuse. Today, we have none. Does that mean you give up if you're sitting here listening to me? Does that mean that you give up if you're a liberal, if you identify as a progressive? Far from it. Far from it. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying here. This isn't some validation in the endless political ping pong. This isn't a game where you give up, on your team and go join the other team. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you need to fight with the same ferociousness for your ideas and for your identities in your spaces, like our brothers and sisters in the IDF fight for their lives in our shared country. So that may mean you go to a major news network and you call them out on the air. You go talk to the weak Ivy League president and you don't accept her half-loaf, mealy-mouthed answer. And you ask the companies, you ask the CEOs to stand up for decency, and you humiliate them, and you call them out when they fail to do so. You see, at ADL, we've been in this fight for 110 years. Like Rabbi Cosgrove said, we work tirelessly to fight anti-Semitism at every turn, at every level, without apology. And I can tell you that over the past week, the team has been fully mobilized, working overtime and then some. We're monitoring the extremists and tracking acts of anti-Jewish hate. I will tell you this, that in the UK, they saw a 400% increase in acts in the days after the massacre, similar to what we saw here. My friends in France report 1,000 acts of anti-Semitism in the 48 hours, the 2 days after the slaughter. And as the days press on, the pressure will build, and we worry it could get worse. So we will monitor the extremists and work with law enforcement and with partner organizations to protect Jewish communities. And we'll be in touch with leaders from the White House to 10 Downing, from Silicon Valley to Wall Street, to ensure all of them do their part to protect our people. And even though we're busy responding and reacting, we're also confronting and continuing to work the way we always have, and we need to continue to do to stop hate from manifesting in the first place, to remind children, like the rabbi talked about, of right versus wrong. And perhaps it's a message, perhaps that's a message we need to relearn ourselves. Never to be silent in the face of evil. Never to stand down in the face of hate. Never to be quiet in the face of anti-Semitism. Never again, never is now. In conclusion, it's said that the way one conducts oneself on Shabbat Bereshit, it sets the tone for the entire year. So in this dark time, today, in this Shabbat, I hope we can fill the world with our knowledge of good. Fill the world with our Lucy, our light. Fill the world with our resolve to press forward and to remember always Am Yisrael Chai, so that together we can fight the darkness in the days to come. Shabbat Shalom.